Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. I am so excited to be with you this evening. It's a special day for me. Today is the anniversary of my ministerial debut. I did my first sermon umpteen years ago. And so it's a good day. I'm really excited. So happy Wednesday to you. Welcome to Without a Trace Ministries. My name is Pastor Andrea Omojola, and I am one of the daughters of this ministry. I get the extreme privilege of being able to work alongside for the last 20 or so years with the apostle of this house and the pastor of this house, Apostle Tina McCrae and Pastor Gary McCrae. If you don't know them, if you've not met them, if this is your first encounter with Without a Trace Ministries, I sure hope that you will continue to come back and at some point in time be able to interact with them because they're fantastic human beings and a great spiritual mother and father, and also just really doing some good work for the Lord. And so you'll want to definitely check back with them. They have afforded me the privilege of doing this 17-week series. I'm excited. We're closing out the year together. And I've been in the book of Esther. And most people are like, well, it doesn't take 17 weeks to do Esther, but we have been doing a slow walk through Esther as we close out this season in a series called The Time Is Now. And right now we're in Esther chapter 4. And so we're going to jump right on in so that we do not belabor the time. And I hope that what we have today is just what you needed. So if you will, go with me to Esther chapter 4, and we are going to pick it up because we actually started in this chapter last week. That was week number 6. This is week number 7. And so we're going to be going in starting at verse number 5. Let's read together. And it reads, Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Verse 8 says, Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for the destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king and beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go back to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter that he may live. But as for me, I haven't been called to come into the king these 30 days. Verse 12 says, and they told Mordecai what Esther had said. And then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than any of the other Jews. But if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, nights. or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word. When you read this chapter, it has to be one of the most talked about parts of the book of Esther. I mean, if you Google it, if you Google the book of Esther, there will be books and swag galore that come up, like a plethora of swag, t-shirts and book covers that are all in, the title that says for such a time as this. And so I wanted to mention the elephant in the room and acknowledge that one of the main themes of Esther centers around that particular phrase, for such a time as this. And there's some importance about that. And at some point in time, we're going to come back to those words. But today, we're not going to sit with that. You'll have to just stay tuned, right? I'm just giving you a little teaser. You're going to have to stay tuned. Stay tuned for more later. You like how I did that, right? But today, I want to spend a brief amount of time focused in a direction that honestly, I didn't even think I was going to be going initially. You see, I had written this lesson to focus more on Mordecai because initially I felt like we were going to go like sort of in a part 2 to what we had talked about last week. Week 6, we were talking about the grief of this season, the grief that people have been in, similar to the grief that Mordecai had displayed in this chapter, the very beginning of the chapter. And so we met him right at the beginning of the chapter, right there in his grief, covered in sackcloth and ashes. And I wanted us to take him out of there. I think that we did that a little bit last week, but I had written sort of a continuation of that. And I was going to spend some time talking about that movement that we have to take after we cry out, because that was the title for last week. It's okay to cry out, or something to that effect. So anyway, that was last week. But I literally felt like the Lord had me shift gears in the 11th hour, y'all. So I don't have 3 points and a song for you today, but I do have a word from the Lord. And I know that he meant it just for you. And so here we are. I'm sure you're wondering now, if we're not talking about Esther, and if we're not talking about Mordecai, then who are we talking about? Well, ta-da. Today, I would like to take a moment to talk to you from the subtopic, Best Supporting Actor. Best Supporting Actor. Hatak, the eunuch. In these 13 verses that we read, well, it might have been 14, we were pulled into the heart of this drama, of our historical account of the events that transpired during Esther's time in her reign. The annihilation of the Jews has been announced, and Mordecai is before the king's palace, just like I said, before the palace gates, in his mourning clothes, in sackcloth, in ashes, covered in ashes. And Esther sits behind the palace gates, seemingly embarrassed to some degree, or at least confused as to why Mordecai is behaving this way. She doesn't really know what's going on. And so it's gotten to the point where she employs the work of a little known individual who gets little press and who gets mentioned only 4 times in the Bible, all of them in this chapter. Hatak. We don't know very much about him except that he is a eunuch, right? Working on the behest of at the behest of the king for the queen. We don't know about his family of origin. We don't know where he's from. We don't know if he's originally Persian or not. We don't know at what age he became a eunuch. We don't know any of that. We don't know how long he's been serving in this capacity. We don't know how he came to become a eunuch. Most people became eunuchs, not of their own volition. So, either sold into slavery or some sort of, forced event. Well, we don't know any of that. We don't know his age at all. He could have been an older person. He could be younger. We don't know even his thoughts. He's not, he doesn't articulate anything in this. And so I'm sure you're wondering, like, well, then, Andrea, how are we going to talk about him? We don't know his opinions even about things that are transpiring, even though he's in the thick of it. We don't know that. But the things we do know speak volumes. See, the truth of the matter is that not every one of us will be Esther and Mordecai, or rather, more likely, we'll feel like we're more like the Hataks of the world. Why would I say that? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So, Hatak is his name. One key thing we know about him is that, right? His name. It's a Hebrew name, or in Hebrew, it means one who is cut off and one who is separated. And we've discussed before, y'all, that names have power, and particularly in the Bible, God spoke about a person's destiny often through their name. In Hebrew, like I said, this name is about being separated, set apart. Perhaps you don't feel like you're separated all the time, but I guarantee that all of us have felt isolated at some time or another, especially in this day and age. It is a time where we get so busy, so surrounded, and yet we feel so very alone. You know, one of the things that I've done is that I'm an author, and the working title of the next book is "Alone in a Crowd," because I, like so many of you, have found myself in moments where separation is almost haunting. And that title came to me specifically when I was sitting in my church, which is a mega church, about 15 or so years ago, a little over 15 years ago, and it was Valentine's weekend. It was when my very first book came out, and it had just come into print, and this was my first book signing. And so I was going to be at my church all day with these thousands of people coming in, right, and through. So this was the first service, and I was on the front row of my church. And I had been a member for a long time. So these are people that love me, know me, all the things. And so it wasn't strangers, my church. And I sat there literally with the spotlight on me and surrounded by these people who knew me. And I've almost never felt so alone. The pastor was even like announcing that I would be in the vestibule afterwards, selling and signing and all that kind of stuff. This is a celebratory moment, a big moment, one of the biggest moments at that time that I had experienced in my life. And I simply felt so alone. And so that's just one example, one small example. And I'm sure that as even I'm talking, many of you could think of many examples where you have been surrounded by people. The spotlight has maybe even been on you. You've been even talking or being, the center of attention, and yet something inside feels separated. Something inside feels so disconnected. Separation for Hatak was spoken over his life from the very beginning. But what no one knew was that he was going to actually be separated for good. That the very separation is what made it possible for him to participate and to be in the right position at the right time for God's will. So sure, the words for such a time as this are applied to Esther in this season, but I absolutely believe the same thing could have been said for Hathach. Could it be said, or could it be that God allowed for his separation with the understanding that he would be positioned to participate in the redemption of a nation? That's pretty major. It is the epitome of the heart behind Genesis 50 and 20 that says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for my good, right? To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of lives, of many lives. And so truly what the devil means for good in this earth among us, God means for good. And you want to know the other word that means set apart or separated is holy. Don't forget that. The separation that the enemy wants you to feel is superseded. It's superseded by the set apartness, for lack of a better word. That's not a word. I just made it up. That the Lord has destined for you. And just like Hatak, your greatness isn't defined by the size of the role that you have or that you play, but it's by the meaningfulness of your impact in whatever it is that you have to deliver. You have to remember again and again that I will say this over and over, that we're a royal priesthood. And that the book tells us, Jeremiah tells us, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you before you were born. I set you apart. Psalm says, know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servants. Hebrews says, such a high priest truly meets our needs, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. That's how Jesus is. And he wants us to meet him in that separation. We are to be set apart in that way, just as he was. And so it might feel not so great sometimes to be that separated one. But I promise you that sometimes it is for the good and the glory of God, for his holiness. You know, I think about how the children of Israel were overlooked in the Passover because they were set apart. Whenever we read in the Old Testament about sacrifices, God would say, put that piece apart to the side, the first of your lot, the firstborn of the cattle, the first of your harvest. When you give your tithes, it's your first fruit. The first thing must be set apart. And so it's that special thing. So to be set apart is not just, or to be separated is not just a cast off thing, but sometimes it's a notation of how special you are to God. And so the world said that he was a eunuch. Hatak was a eunuch. He was separated and he was a eunuch. So that's the next thing we consider. Beyond his name, we know this about him. As we discussed before, eunuchs held significant positions in the royal system, in the hierarchy, despite the fact that they didn't quite fit in. They were elevated in these weird ways, right? So they were not really fitting in, but they also had really a lot of like inside knowledge and input and kind of influence. They were elevated. They had a lot of trust and intimacy bestowed upon them by the royal family that exceeded that of any others, for that matter. By design, the eunuchs were the most trusted in many cases in the royal kingdoms. Eunuchs were castrated males who were positioned to keep watch over the royal bed. That's the word. The word has origins in that definition of a watcher of the royal bed or something to that effect when I was doing my research. And so literally it's the person that the king can trust with his harem, his wife, his wives, his concubines, because the person is, it's thought that because they were castrated and don't have genitals or don't have, at least don't have testes, there's not going to be this threat of them being able to soil the royal lineage. So they could be trusted to be close to the king and the queen and the concubines and anybody who is a part of the harem. They were allowed into the most intimate spaces and to be close and could move with a lot of freedom that other people couldn't move. And so, one of the things I have to correct. So, I have a bit of a correction to make because previously, in one of my earlier um, conversations, I was imagining, and so I kind of put this image out that I had this image of the advisors and of the eunuchs of like have as being like bodyguards and like men in black kind of image, when in fact they were more androgynous than that. They're more like this. Because most eunuchs were castrated at young ages. And so they often had not developed their machismo. They did not have high amounts of testosterone. And so they definitely were more on the effeminate side. This was only important in that it meant that they were not intimidating and that they were often individuals that were unassuming and less intimidating in the eyes of the people around them, in fact. So they sort of faded into the background in many ways. You can imagine then this androgynous man who like fades in the background, who nobody really considers, would often get overlooked and perhaps even ridiculed if he is noticed. That makes the fact that he's significant for me even sweeter. Hatak becomes this natural go-to instrument or methodology or whatever. Like he's Verizon between in this exchange between Mordecai and Queen Esther. God isn't he isn't interested in these societal definitions about what is powerful or what is good or who should be honored or who should be the one. Throughout time, he has chosen the weak, the unassuming, the overlooked, the misfit to participate in divine providence. Hatak was used in this way, and as evidenced by the outcomes, he was trustworthy and he was faithful in his divine appointment, you all. He played the linchpin role to a T in this epic game of telephone. Y'all know that game when you're a kid, and if you whisper in somebody's ear, and by the time it gets down the line to the next person, next person, next person, the message has gotten distorted. But in this case, zero distortion. Not a single message was dropped or missed. It's not like he could just jot down the information either on a scratch pad. This wasn't the 21st century, y'all. He didn't have a notepad or a cell phone or a memo app or anything to transcribe the messages. It was all up here. He was operating in his giftings in excellence. He also didn't run and tell anybody either. He wasn't central gossips, you know. He wasn't going out, hey, you know what I heard? Because y'all remember, nobody knew that Esther was a Jew. So they're having this really like vulnerable exchange about the fact that Esther's people are the Jews. That could have got Esther killed like right now. Hathach could have gone and been like, hey, listen, I heard, and this is the message, and blah, 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 blah. King, you need to do something. Just saying. He was in a position of power to some extent. He didn't spread rumors. He was on point. He was a model of discretion. So, dear misfits, don't simply assume that you won't be used. Don't fade to black. Don't get used to being in the shadow completely. Whatever you do it as unto the Lord with excellence. Do it with pride. When do it as if those 4 verses that your name gets mentioned are the ones that are going to be on blast for real. Because when others don't know what you have to offer, God does. And He's putting you in position to offer just the right thing at the right time. But you have to be ready. If the opportunity comes and you're shaky and iffy with it, unprepared, untrustworthy, then you will have let the other hotbacks and misfits in the world down. I have done that before. We've all done that. We've missed an opportunity. We failed. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. We dropped the ball. I've done it. I own that. Ugh, regret sucks. Don't live in that space of regret. And know that it's okay for you to just stay on point so that you can shine from behind. Because shining from behind is sometimes more important than shining from the front. Truth. I mean, people talk about the president or other politicians, like, but the truth of the matter is that those are like the front facing people. And it's really the people behind them that we need to be more concerned about. It's the people we don't see. We should be more concerned about. I'm reminded of the Wizard of Oz or the Wiz, whichever one is your favorite. It's not the big scary face in the front that often makes the real difference. It's the small voice behind, or even the Dorothy and her ragtag crew of misfits that save the day. Don't forget. So I think we've got it all twisted in this day and age. We think it has to be big and bold, and it doesn't. It doesn't. There's at the end of the day, there's a role for everyone. Every story definitely has its leading characters, for sure. Sure, there are storylines for even you where you are the leading lady or the leading man. But just like any good actor, your portfolio is varied and probably includes roles on every level and in every different point in the story, and you're at different points in your career, if you to use that analogy. So there's a necessity for people at all levels and roles for all of us. Alexandra Bracken is quoted as saying, "It doesn't matter how great the lead cast is if supporting actors don't back them up." So that supporting role is so important. Consider one of the greats, Denzel Washington. You're welcome. Whew. Mm, mm, mm. Okay, I digress. Come back to Jesus. All right, now. Anyway, so Denzel won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in the movie Glory in 1990. Now, he has since gone and gotten the goods for Best Actor, and he's done other nominations and so forth, and he's been doing, so many other things. But his first actual win was for that as a supporting actor. Now, that doesn't take anything away from him as a leading man that he is. He will always be a leading man, even as he goes into retirement in this season. He's still a leading man, even though many of his roles he's played a supporting actor. He's still a leading man. So if you're the kind that's like, I'm only a leading person, please understand that even the best of the best they appreciate the value of being a supporting actor. And the truth is that even Hatak, every supporting actor, someone like Hatak is a good leader. He was a leader. He led from the back. And I appreciate this quote that says that a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim is fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. You almost like you don't even need to be there, but you can sit there and know that it got done, and they might take the credit, but what you know. And that's all that really matters. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough, y'all. Sometimes it has to be enough. Truly, sometimes we have to be the ones to say, he must increase and I must decrease. So perhaps that's the word for someone today. Maybe that's it, y'all. That you need to be willing to be the best supporting for glory. No matter what your ultimate destination will be, no matter what your ultimate destiny will be. And I'm not saying glory the movie, I'm saying for God's glory. As we sit sometimes feeling isolated, and we need to remember that we are simply set apart and that we're operating in integrity and faithfulness and excellence and doing all that's required of us in this season. We need to sometimes just step back, step aside, but still keep stepping and watch God work, y'all. We need to be willing to get out of the way. I'm going to say it again, get out of the way, y'all, so that God's ultimate work can be done and his will can be accomplished. And I don't know who that's for, but I pray that you have heard him loud and clear. May this be the season. May this be your season of best supporting actor. In some ways, even if you're a lead in many other ways, may you be supporting his glory at all times. That's the word. Like I said, not 3 points in a song, just a word for you from the words or from the life or from the 4 verses that Hatak was mentioned in. I hope you heard it. Yeah. Father, would you have your way? Would you seal this word? In Jesus' name, amen. And now I have just a few announcements before we go our separate ways. As always, we want to make sure that you are aware of the things that Without a Trace Ministries has to offer in honor of our very own mother, Barbara Jean Metcalf. Please remember that if you or someone you know is caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, that we do have a respite care scholarship available. And so you can go to watmcares.org and get more information about applying for that scholarship. It's a wonderful respite care option. And just like today, we are so glad that so many people are joining us who are people who are living with dementia and their caregivers. This is a great opportunity on 3rd and 4th Wednesdays, where we have Wellness Wednesday, for you to come in, be refreshed, hear the word of God, and we invite you to spread the word about these particular weeks, for you to come in and just be ministered to. And we try to keep it as short as possible, just so that you can get as much as you possibly can. We also want to remind you that no matter where you're joining us from, we always want to hear from you. So you can reach us at Facebook, Instagram Messenger at WATMINC, and via email at WATM withoutatracecares@gmail.com. And also, you can go to our website at www.withoutatraceministries.com. And then finally, we always want to remind you that ministry happens with funds. And so there are 4 ways for you to be part of the fun with your funds. So please consider sowing a seed into this ministry. They're doing some really wonderful things. Like we mentioned, supporting those who are supporting others in Alzheimer's and um, dementia services, and also doing some cancer care ministry, domestic violence ministry, some other community service, and neighbors in need ministry. So many things, especially in this time and season when there's so much needs out there, so many needs out there. Without a Trace is in the community, so you can be a part. This is a really great place for you to plant your seed, and it will go back out into the community. You can do so with Cash App. You can do so with Zelle. You can do so on the website and mailing in. Each of those options are displayed here on the screen. And as always, it's been my distinct pleasure to be able to be with you today. I hope that you will join me again next week. Don't forget to tell a friend. We love you. Praying for you this week. Have a great, epic week on purpose. We'll see you again. Bye bye.